Support for the Q&A with A.P.C. is provided by the Massa Corporation. For 55 years, the Massa Corporation has provided companies with a complete line of printing solutions, from custom labels to contract packaging services, as well as packaging equipment and supplies. Proudly serving Virginia and its neighbors since 1961. Online at massacorp.com. This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you're listening to the Q&A with A.P.C., the show that features conversations with artists, cultural figures, policymakers, performers, and other innovators living in Virginia. Episode 23, Derrick Borte. Movie producer, writer, and director Derrick Borte began his career as a painter. After receiving his Bachelor's of Fine Arts from Old Dominion University, he earned a master's degree in film and media studies from the New School in New York City. He later joined the production staff at Sony Music Studios, where he began his work in production, film, and video. In 2010, Derrick Borte wrote, produced, and directed The Joneses, a film starring David Duchovny, Demi Moore, and Amber Heard. The Joneses premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival and is currently streaming on Netflix. His other films include Haters and Dark Around the Stars. In 2016, he released London Town, a film that tells the story of one 14-year-old boy's discovery of the British punk rock band The Clash. The film premiered in Norfolk, as well as in London, Rome, and New York. In this episode of the Q&A with A.P.C., Derrick talks about the first movie that made an impression on him, the lessons he learned as a television news journalist, how to write a script that people want to read, and what it's like working in Hollywood while living in Virginia. You were born in Frankfurt, Germany?
I was, yeah.
How did that happen?
My father got drafted and got sent to Germany instead of Vietnam, and my mom went to go live there with him, and that's when I arrived.
What branch of the military?
Army.
And how long were you in Germany for?
I think a little under a year.
Yeah. And then you moved back stateside?
Back to Norfolk, yeah.
Your father was still in the...
No. He just, when he got out of the military, they came back here with me and started in Norfolk, ended up in Virginia Beach.
Your dad has a construction business, home building business. Did he always do that, or was there something before the home building?
Yeah, I mean, he had a few other businesses and worked as a longshoreman and just started drawing houses and building them, and people liked them, and 30 years later or 35 years later, he does some pretty amazing work. I mean, he only does like 1-2 houses a year, but they're big and wonderful. And
has he had training for that?
No.
He just sort of picked up the pen and paper and
started drawing these houses. And I guess in the beginning he had to have a structural engineer probably sign off on them or something. But then, after a while, I think he just would turn in his plans and the city would stamp them and he could build them. And
the guts too, not just the outside.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, totally. And I think, to go from someone who's completely untrained to being, he was named, Professional Builder magazine named him one of the luxury leaders for the whole country, in terms of the kind of work he did, which was really high-end custom homes, and kind of a cool achievement,
Absolutely.
Kind of good inspiration for me, and I'm sure for my brother as well.
Did he have a drafting table in an office, or was it sort of down at the kitchen table in front of everyone?
He had a drafting table, yeah, definitely, and I definitely spent time there.
Kind of peeking over the shoulder, or doing your own thing.
Doing my own thing, and just I've drawn a few houses myself and built one with him, and did another sort of major renovation with him. It's fun working with him, actually. It was fun. It's always kind of a cool time to explore something different like that, and working with him a couple times was really cool.
Was he artistic in other areas, or was it just kind of an architecture thing? Was it flowers or trees or landscapes, or was it always houses?
I think that he thinks he was. Um, sort of decided to start carving rocks at some point, and was carving these massive pieces of granite and marble in my front yard when I'd come home from school in junior high school, and just I guess he's done a few things like that.
Wow. Derrick, do you remember the first image, painting, or movie that stuck with you as a child?
I think movie-wise, I went to go see somehow, because I'm sure that it was probably rated R, but I mean, at an early age, and maybe like kindergarten, I remember going to see the double feature of Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More. The
It's westerns.
the spaghetti westerns,
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood, yeah. And they stuck with me. That and the early Planet of the Apes movies.
What stuck with you about the spaghetti westerns? Was it the large sort of landscape cinescope sort of thing, or the action, or?
Yeah, I don't know that the cinematic elements stuck with me as much as just the kind of like grab you by the guts kind of power that stuff had, just to, I guess, well, then again, maybe in the 70s, 6-year-olds had a longer attention span than they do now. I don't know, but just sitting in a chair for a couple hours, just being glued to the screen, I think that just is just a variety of things, from the stories to even the music. I mean, just how the powerful experience that movie going is, really, I think is probably what got me.
The sensory pull of it.
Absolutely.
You went to public high school in Virginia Beach, went to First Colonial High School.
I did.
You weren't necessarily into acting during that time. What were you into, if not acting and theater?
I think that in high school, I kind of was into drawing in the margins of my notebooks and just kind of finding a way to get through, because it was not very stimulating or I don't know. I didn't want to be there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it was just basically, how do I pass my classes somehow, go surfing, and just find a way to make it to whatever was going to be next.
How were your grades in terms of actual letters?
My grades on tests were always pretty good, but my grades on my report card were not, because I kind of had a problem with the logic of homework and having to do homework when I felt like I understood the material. So I kind of decided, why should I go do this math problem 58 times tonight when I can get it on, I can answer it correctly on the test. So I kind of had issues with the structure of high school, and I just wasn't inspired to be there. I wasn't inspired to learn. I wasn't inspired to do the work that was being asked of me.
You went to Old Dominion and got a degree in painting. Was it painting or fine arts? Or is it the same?
It was a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I guess my focus was painting. At the time I was doing a lot of graphic design for a lot of the surf companies to pay the bills, just as a way to travel, but at school I was painting mostly, or multimedia work, different things like that.
If we were to see some of those graphic design images for the surf companies now, what kind of things would we see? What were they?
I did a lot of T-shirts, like for Billabong and Rip Curl, and even some of the local companies. But T-shirts were kind of an easy thing to do designs and send them out, and companies would buy them, and did a lot of work for Gotcha as well. And I don't know what they would look like. They were all just kind of different according to what just kind of ideas that I had for each company.
What was that animal on Gotcha? Was it a stand-up shark with a flag?
Oh yeah, it was. It was a stand-up shark with a what looked like kind of a golf flag or something.
Right.
Yeah.
You still have any of those designs? Any of the shirts?
I don't have any of them.
Do you wish you did?
I don't know. It might be cool to show my kids.
Yeah. It's coming back around, right?
Yeah, right.
You went to California in 1991 and worked as an artist. You sold some work in California. What gallery, what kind of pieces were you working on and selling?
I went out there with a few crates of work that I had done while I was at ODU, and quickly got invited to do to be part of a group show at a gallery in Beverly Hills, Earl McGrath Gallery, and all of a sudden started selling work. And within a couple months, I thought, I'm on my path to art stardom. And it was kind of an exciting time. I think I was about 22 years old or something, and then the art market kind of just tanked, and I started bartending. I don't know. I got very disillusioned with the art world. It seemed to me like it was far more important what you had to say about your work and the intention of it than the work itself. And I kind of always felt like you can't travel with your work to tell people about it. Mm-hmm. So it kind of needs to be able to speak for itself. And I just kind of saw a lot of the fluff of the art world in a way that I didn't want to really be involved with it.
What were your pieces like? I mean, describe were they modern or?
I always liked paint and I liked to work big, but I also got into printmaking and I was doing prints of appropriated imagery, like photo collages on big sheets of metal with text sometimes. And then I would take whatever I could find and print on top of it. Like there's a place called Gemini, a print house in LA, and I would drive by there every day, and there was always this dumpster out back, and I always wondered what was in the dumpster. And one day I decided to stop after work. It was in the middle of the night. I stopped and looked in the dumpster and dived in and pulled out this 6-foot John Baldessari print, and decided I would screen print over top of it with a giant, what looked like a giant rubber stamp that said museum quality. And I took a picture of it and sent it to Baldessari with this note, sort of referencing some other work where people had done things like the famous erase de Kooning and things like that.
Right.
And I thought, Baldessari is going to call me and ask me to come over for a beer and whatever. And next thing I know, I get a letter from his lawyers. And,
the worst possible.
Yeah, exactly, telling me I need to destroy it. And the best part about it is literally within a day or two, I drive back by Gemini, and they've got barbed wire and lights and cameras outside by the dumpster now, because I guess they probably got threatened with a big lawsuit or something.
And so the market collapsed due to some larger countrywide sort of recession, or was it a particular thing with the art market?
I don't even know. I just know that all I heard from artists and galleries was that it seemed like the art market just kind of dried up, and I'm sure not on all levels, but on the level that I was working, it dried up. I think it was probably a fortuitous thing that allowed me to get some perspective on it and decide to make a change.
And the change was coming back to the East Coast. You enrolled at the New School in New York City, studied film, got a master's in media studies. What was that experience like at the New School?
It was wonderful. I moved to New York, and a good friend of mine from Virginia Beach had just graduated from the New School and had a master's in film there also. And he was working for Sony, and I was staying in one of his extra rooms. And, so I kind of had a friend there already and started school. And he calls me one night and says, I'm working on this Neil Diamond show, and I don't know, his art director, production designer, somebody walked off the job, and I told them, you were an art director, so can you come to work? So I went in and kind of painted this set and did this, kind of thing for this Neil Diamond show, and it was my first experience in production. But I was hooked. I mean, it was so much fun, and the collaborative part of it was really cool, and then I got hired there. So I pretty much did anything and everything I could do, from just regular, like, sort of PAing to editor's assistant to painting the massive studio. I mean, whatever I could do on any given day while I was there. You'd have David Byrne and Bob Dylan and Michael Jackson, and I mean, you name it. It was a really there was a lot going on there. We shot all the MTV Unplugs there. We shot, just amazing stuff there. I met people like Jeff Buckley there, and really got turned on to a lot of bands that were doing showcases that had really before they broke and things like that. And it was just an amazing experience. And I was working for Scott Lockmus, who ran the main stage there, who's become my producing partner, and we've been working together for, at this point, 20 years.
You returned to Norfolk after New York City and started to start your own business. And for 2 years, you worked at the NBC affiliate station here as a on-air reporter. What was that experience like, creating stories every day to air, day of?
It was tricky. I mean, I'd come from working on what I would consider fairly high level production at Sony, and dropped into a newsroom where I'm not so sure that the reception that I got there was what I was expecting.
What were you expecting?
Well, I don't know what I was expecting. I just know that I wanted to shoot, I wanted to edit, I wanted to kind of do what I wanted to do, and there's a kind of, I guess, a very there was a much stricter protocol in terms of I think the first day I went out and shot something, and the photographer that I was working with, we got back to the station, and he said, okay, so go log your tape and do your paper edit and send it to me, and I'll cut it. And it's like, no, let's just go in the edit room and cut it. I mean, why should I go do a paper edit? Like I didn't buy into the process very easily.
Yeah.
And I think that it was a rough transition for me, and I think that the people in the newsroom didn't know what to do with me, because the GM of the station hired me and kind of dropped me in the newsroom, and I wasn't a news reporter. I was kind of a feature reporter, and could kind of do whatever I wanted. I'd go out to the bingo palace and shoot for half a day and come back and cut a package together to go on the air with the strange people that I found at the bingo parlor during the day.
Yeah.
It was fun, and yet I just don't think that the news director, as well as even the other reporters at first, were kind of just not sure of what to make of it, and some of them really did reach out and help me kind of find my way there. In the long run, it really turned out to be an amazing experience, because I had to come in every day and really create a 3-minute piece to go on the air that day out of nothing. I learned a lot in terms of guerrilla filmmaking, in terms of how do you go out with no resources and find some cool things to shoot and report on, and then come back and cut it into some kind of a concise story that is worth putting on the air.
Was that your first experience on camera?
Yeah, it was, and my last.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
When did you start making commercials?
Right when I left Wavy, I kind of just had some ideas for some, I don't know what you'd call them. I guess they were short films, but which kind of led to making commercials. And next thing you know, I was making a lot of commercials. And I, had a company in Norfolk that was doing everything from car commercials to tax commercials, you name it.
And what year is this?
This was starting in 95 for maybe 6 or 7 years.
In 2009, a movie you wrote and directed called The Joneses came out, and the movie starred David Duchovny, Demi Moore, Amber Heard, and Gary Cole, among others. It's about a marketing division disguised as a family. How did the idea come about?
I was watching John Stossel reporting about stealth marketing, about companies hiring models to go to 10 bars a night and order a Campari and soda, and watch the people around start to order a Campari. Or Kodak, or I think it was Kodak, it was one of the early digital cameras, was hiring people to go to Disney World and places and ask other people to take their family pictures and try to explain the camera to them in a way that really showed them how amazing this new digital camera was. And I just thought, what if you take this to its logical conclusion and make it a whole family that is just dropped into a neighborhood, and they're just living billboards for the products that they sell.
When you were making it, you sent the script out, and people loved it straight away. But everyone wanted, and a lot of people, if not almost everyone, wanted to do it, but without you as the director.
Yeah.
But you held firm and you directed it yourself. What was the experience like, standing up, in a sense, to this massive industry?
It wasn't as as heroic maybe as it might sound, and because I had a day job. I was still making commercials. I could afford to pay my bills. On one hand, it might seem so strange to turn down the amount of money that I turned down to sell the script. I only wrote it so that I could direct it, so it just didn't make any sense to sell it. And I had a lot of people that helped me along the way, and I got a phone call one day from a very well-known director who through a mutual friend knew what I was going through in terms of being offered a lot of money to sell the script. And he called me and said, don't sell the script. He said, make your movie and then do whatever you want. But if you wrote it to direct it, don't sell it, because you're going to have some money in the bank, but you're not going to be any closer to doing what you want to do. So, it kind of just happened, and I don't think I ever thought twice about it. I wrote it to direct it, and that's what I did.
What was the conversation like inside your house when people were calling and wanting to buy it, and you're like, I'm going to hold off?
It was strange. When the script went out into the world, every single night my phone would start ringing around, say 4 p.m. here Eastern time, and it was agents, and it was producers, and it was sometimes even actors who had gotten the script. I mean, really, it was kind of crazy how viral the script went. And then I'd go to L.A. and I would sit at this hotel in Santa Monica and just have meetings one after the other every hour on the hour for 2 weeks straight with the same actors and producers and you name it. And I just decided that I'm gonna let this sort of go, happen and try not to do anything but kind of absorb all of it and see. I don't have to make any decisions. I'm gonna just see what happens, and if I see the path that I'm supposed to take, that's what I'm gonna do, and that's kind of what I did.
You filmed the Joneses in Georgia over 32 days. And the first day on set, you thought you might actually kind of go back to your trailer and throw up, but which I read, but you didn't. And you found that you weren't overwhelmed in large part because of your experiences being on set directing commercials. What specific things had you learned from commercial shoots that you unknowingly brought with you to the set of the Joneses?
Well, I just think it's all production is kind of the same. The meter's running, and you have a certain goal to you're trying to accomplish. And I think through working in commercials, I felt comfortable. I felt like things slowed down. I think in my daily life, I spin a lot of plates, and I'm kind of I go at a very high speed. But when I'm on set on any kind of production, I feel like everything kind of slows down, and I'm able to focus actually in a way that I can't in my normal life. I don't know that I got that from commercials as much as, I'm sure that helped. When I went on set on the Joneses, I treated it as though it was any other day at work, and I treated the crew with respect and was open to collaboration. And I just kind of, I appreciated the fact that I was there, and it went wonderfully. I'm sure some of that was a result of the thousands of hours of experience I already had at that point.
What are the first things you think about having to accomplish on day one on set?
Look, I think there are a lot of directors that are so talented, and there are others who just who work hard, and some have a mix of both. I just have always decided that I'm going to work harder than anybody else because I don't know where I am on that other meter, So I'm gonna prep like crazy, so that I can be in the moment on that first day and on every other day, because I've prepped so much that I can throw it all out the window and be in the moment and allow for happy accidents to happen. And I think that chance is an interesting thing. And if you're open to things and you're prepared, accidents can happen and they're wonderful. If you're not, accidents can happen and they can derail you in a huge way. I think for me, as far as day one goes, look, I want to establish the tone on the set with the crew. Every single day before work, I will go and say hello to every single member of the crew and thank them for being there. It goes a long way. I think that that if they feel like they're appreciated and empowered to do what they do well, they're going to work that much harder. I still do that every day when I'm working. So I think that that's definitely a day one thing, but it's also a day 28 thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Quentin Tarantino on the Howard Stern show from a few years back who was talking about being a director. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, basically, he didn't think he could be a director because he didn't know about lenses or composition or how to handle the camera. But then he learned that a director's primary job is to as simply and as clearly as possible explain to actors and members of the crew what the vision is for the film, and then to trust them to do it. That he didn't have to really learn about focal lengths or lighting, how to rig lights, or how to. Is that true? Well, I mean, or, not true, but I mean, like, is it about having a vision and articulating it as simply as possible, and then trusting?
Well, I think, look, part of it is I pride myself on being the dumbest guy in the room. I want to hire amazing people and empower them to do what they do well, but I've got to be able to to know that they can do that also. So just telling someone my vision of something, I think that I have to know enough about lighting and lenses and the things you talked about and composition. I have to know enough about it so that I'm not just blindly putting my fate and the fate of a film or a commercial, whatever, into the hands of someone who may have a good resume. But so I think you have to know some of it. I mean, I feel like I worked enough in production from a PA all the way, through, quite a number of jobs on set, that I know enough about production that, when I'm talking to crew and when I'm talking to actors at this point as well, I mean, I think that, yeah, you have to be clear about what you want, but at the same time, I think you have to have the tool belt. You have to have you have to know that, wow, we're running out of time. We have 22 minutes left before we're gonna have to call the day, and we've got to get this set up. And I know if I tell this person, tell the DP, like, throw this lens on and throw that one light right over there, and we can get it. I can bail us out of something that might cost us money or worse, just not be able to get something that we need. So I think that having that base of knowledge is important beyond just the creative vision of something.
I have a game on the show from time to time on certain episodes, which is a rapid fire sort of trivia thing, which we're not going to do, but we're going to do sort of a spin-off on it. So I have some questions, some sort of movie industry based questions, and I'm going to give you sort of a topic, and you're going to talk about, as a director, either in your experience or sort of overall, but mostly in your experience, does a director, or do you have no control over that, some control over it, or total control of it?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So, Derrick Borte, how much control do you have over cinematography? No control, some control, or total control?
I would say some control.
Costume design.
Some control. I mean, I and that's by choice, by the way, as far as both of those. I mean, I know you want to rapid fire this, but I'll tell you, this is by choice. I mean, I think that I'm very opinionated. I know what I want, but at the same time, if I've hired the right cinematographer and the right costume designer, I don't want to have total control. I want there to be a collaborative back and forth. So That's why I say some control.
Editing.
That depends on the contract. I mean, I've gotten final cut on a couple films and not on other films, but I would prefer to have total control of editing.
What is final cut?
Final cut is I finish, my version of the film. Now, granted, with testing or feedback from producers, etc. But I would love to be the one that has the final decision over the finished product. I'm a very collaborative person, I think, and yet, if I feel really strongly about something, I want to be able to say, this is what it's going to be.
Music and licensing.
Unfortunately, that's such a function of budget. So I'd say some control. I mean, I can pick things as long as they fit within the budget, or we can find more budget elsewhere, but some control.
Have you ever fought for something because you felt like it just that particular song worked and we had to have it even though the budget was... Did you ever fight for something like that for music? You hear that sometimes.
All the time. All the time,
How does that work? It depends on the project?
Look, I think the best producers and line producers are the ones that don't just say no. They say, okay, if this is something you really want, we have to find a way to take the money from something else to give it to you. And I think that the best relationships and the ones that I've found that last the longest and I enjoy are the ones where you try to solve the problem together. So I've been turned down flatly on certain things before, but most often you try to find some workable solution.
Choosing the actors.
Some control. I think that, that's a tricky one sometimes. Sometimes you got a financier that says this person has to be in this film, and you decide whether it's worth making the film or not. Sometimes the actor you want doesn't want to work with you on that film. So I'd say some control.
The poster.
The poster, I think among the choices, I'd still say some control, although I will say the last couple, both the Joneses and London Town, I did the poster for myself.
You mean graphic design-wise?
And I did the poster, and then they paid graphic artists or ad agencies to do 50 more versions of the poster, and then everybody came back to the one that I did. So I'd still say some control. I'm always going to put my 2 cents worth in ways that are I'll probably go ahead and create a poster no matter what, and hopefully it's the one that wins out. But if someone does one that's far better, I'm going to be the first one to say, let's use theirs.
Advertising.
No control.
The trailer.
I would say almost no control. I get to fire off some notes, but for the most part, I don't have any control over that.
The person who edits or comes up with the edit for the trailer is not necessarily the editor of the film itself?
Rarely the editor. It's usually a separate company that really cuts trailers.
No control, some control, total control, getting the movie on Netflix.
No control. That's if Netflix wants it, they'll get it.
Where the film premieres, location-wise?
No control, really, although for London Town, we did get to do kind of a creative thing where even though it had premiered at the LA Film Festival and the world premiere was at the London Film Festival, 2 nights before, we shifted everything around and got to do a premiere at the Narrow here in Norfolk, which was important to me. And I can't believe that IFC, the distributor, was able to pull it off. But it was really cool. It meant a lot to me, and I think it was a really great thing for the Narrow as well.
How much control do producers have over a director?
Usually, if it's their project and they're hiring a director, they have total control. If it's a project that a producer is developing with a director, then they're working together already. So
right,
unless the director owns the material, owns the IP or owns the script or whatever, then they're going to have total control.
Derrick Borte, thanks for playing No Control, Some Control, Total Control. Derrick, describe what the trailers actors stay in when they're not needed on set are like.
I think it depends on the budget of your film. They can be slightly larger porta potties with a little bench in them, or they can be luxurious,
like an RV camping
RV
kind of
campers. Yeah, exactly.
What have your trailers been like?
I've never had the luxurious RV, but I've had decent trailers, but and then I've had no trailer. One of the films I shot in Utah, we took over this old school. There were no trailers for anybody, but I had a great art classroom that I just sort of put a desk in and a chair and had this massive room with beautiful light, and that became my trailer for the film.
In 2013, you directed the movie Dark Around the Stars, and in 2015, you directed and co-wrote the movie Haters. What was the experience as a co-writer like creatively and logistically?
I have a great relationship with my writing partner, Danny Forte. We've probably written 10 or more, maybe 12 scripts together, full feature screenplays together, as well as some TV. So it's a great experience because we go into the projects together. It's not like one of us is being forced on the other one. We work well together, so it's a great experience.
Is he East Coast or West Coast?
He's East Coast. He's Virginia Beach, Norfolk.
And is it a face-to-face thing? Like, what's the setup like?
It just depends. I mean, it's either face-to-face with the help of the Collaborator tool in Final Draft, where we just literally, bounce the script back and forth to each other while we're sitting in the same room, or it's firing pages back and forth to each other via email, or it really just depends on what's convenient or what we can actually do.
Where you are in your day.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Yeah. But we're constantly writing and just find a way to do it.
I heard an interview with Damien Chazelle, the director of La La Land, who said when he was working as a script doctor in Hollywood, he designed his script so that people would always try and turn to the next page, whether it was page layout or ending every page on a mini cliffhanger. He tried everything, which made me think, how far do most script readers get before they move on to another script? And what's the percentage of scripts that actually are read cover to cover?
I imagine it's pretty low. I think that if a script doesn't get you in 10 or 15 pages, most people will, I think, put it down. I think you've got to hook somebody. I would say in the first 3 or 4 pages, but absolutely within the first 10. But I'm sure that a lot of scripts that don't get finished. I mean, I think that one of the things I try to tell people that I've worked with a lot of the students at ODU and other people have sent me screenplays over the years, and it's, if I can't get past page 10 or 15 and I'm trying to read it as a favor for someone who's a friend, then some reader that doesn't know them is never going to get past that. So, there's definitely something to that.
Haters was released through video on demand. How do movies end up not getting a theatrical release?
A theatrical release is very expensive. To advertise a film and put it in a few hundred theaters is a huge investment that sometimes a distributor doesn't want to make. So if they think they can make their money via a digital distribution and possibly make even more money than they would make on a theatrical release, then they're going to do it. It's harder and harder to get a theatrical release, and digital releases are very profitable sometimes. So the distributor is going to do whatever they think their business model tells them to do. I don't think it's really considered a defeat or failure anymore the way it used to be if you don't get a theatrical release. I think that, there have been so many movies that have made money and done so well that never got in theaters. It's kind of not the same as it used to be.
How did you come across the Untitled Joe Strummer project?
I've been getting these offers for some I don't know, films that I wasn't that interested in, and just having a conversation with my agent. He said, "What's your dream project?" And I just threw out, without even thinking about it, I would love to find a project about a kid discovering the Clash. And he said, "You're not going to believe it, but somebody offered another client of mine this film. That's exactly what it is. It's set in England. 14-year-old kid discovers the Clash." He sent me the script and I read it like probably within 45 minutes to an hour. And I called him back and said, I love this. I want to make this movie. What can we do? And he got me a meeting with the producers and they liked my take on it. And then for 6 years or so, we tried to get it made.
Who were the Clash?
I think they're most often associated, with punk music, punk rock, from that punk era. And to me, I wouldn't really consider them. I think there's so much more than punk. I think they were influenced by so much other music, whether it's reggae or world music. I mean, they really they transcend punk. But I think for the most part, people would consider them punk.
The actors sang and played their own instruments as opposed to lip syncing. Was that a tough decision to do? What was the decision behind that?
Well, at first we only had the rights to the studio tracks. The Clash granted us the rights to those songs, and I just had a horrible feeling that we can't have them singing along to the studio tracks. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be a disservice to the Clash. So we got the rights to the studio track. To the live tracks. But then, just in talking with Johnny Rhys Meyers, who plays Joe Strummer in the film, I knew he was musical, and I said, what would you think about recording these live tracks and let's have you sing them? And he was game. So we put a band together. I put a band together, and we had auditions and rehearsals, and we put this band together. And then this pretty well-known producer, Steve McLaughlin, recorded them and as the Clash, and they nailed it. So we decided we were going to do all of the live performances as live performances, and I think it really was absolutely the right choice.
Is there a soundtrack? Forgive me for not knowing the answer to this. Is there a soundtrack?
There should be. I don't know.
Because that'd be nice. Because I own the Walk the Line soundtrack with Reese Witherspoon and Joaquin Phoenix, and
sure.
It's great. And it's I love the songs, and I also love their personal take on it.
Yeah. There should be. I don't know, honestly. I don't think I've been asked that before.
London Town is based around the theme that music can change someone's life, or at a minimum, change someone's perception of the world around them. Does the music you listen to have any influence on your kids, or are they on their own level?
I share musical tastes with one of my kids for sure. We go to concerts together, and I've introduced her to music. She's introduced me to music. The other ones who are younger, I think that at the moment we're not really sharing too much in terms of music, but we may in the future. You never know.
There was a scene in London Town where there is a close-up shot of a handwritten letter, and the camera is in close-up so that we as the audience can read what the letter says. How do you know how long to keep the letter on screen for the average reader to be able to read the whole thing?
Wow. Probably had a few dozen people read it and tried to time it out so that everybody could hopefully read it.
Is that how we got to the length of the time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It was just kind of like, it was kind of literally like, we had a bunch of people read it. Was it too fast for you to read or too slow? What was it for you?
No, it was just right. And I had some time left over, so I felt personally good because there was some time left over. That there must have been some real discussion, at least in the editing suite, about how long are we going to do this? And then I thought, is there research that goes into it or, anything like that? So, yeah. But no, I read it and I had time. So thanks.
Good.
You cut your wife and kids out of the movie.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
Not the first time.
Wait, is that true?
Yeah, it's true. They have always been great sports about letting me put them in things when I've needed them, whether it be commercials, films, whatever. And on a feature, when you're in the edit room, you have to cut the best film you can cut, and you have to cut the shortest, you want to get people through a film. So most often, I think the biggest mistake I see in less experienced filmmakers is their films are just way too long. So you've got to cut anything and everything that's not moving the story forward, I think. And even if that's your wife and kids, sometimes it happens, but I know they were there and I appreciate it. And, it's a touchy political issue around my house.
Do actors want a director who knows precisely how each word of dialogue should sound and what the exact composition of each shot should be? Or do actors want a director who allows for more freedom and more space to play with?
I don't think you ever want to give an actor line readings, in terms of that kind of detail. At least I don't. I want to empower them to do their best work. I want to put them in a situation that they feel like they can find the character and within the parameters of what the script needs. I want to give them everything that they need to do what they do.
I've heard, though, from directors, Wes Anderson comes to mind, who's fantastic, but one does not deviate from his script. In fact, he will say, no, say it like this. The chair belongs in the hallway. And you got to say it, the chair belongs in the hallway. But I could see it both ways. I could see it, I know exactly what I have to do. And it is very clear and very concise. And I know exactly how it should go. And that would take some pressure off, maybe adds a different kind of pressure. But as an actor, I could see both sides, wanting to have, the old sort of adage, like, let's do one for me, or here, it's that kind of thing.
Sure. There are times that I've had to explain a line in a way, in that way, not necessarily as a stylistic choice, which I think that, a director that's known for kind of a specific style might have to. As far as deviating from the script goes, I love when an actor comes and says, hey, I had this thought about this line right here or whatever. My thought is usually, let's try it. I don't want to shoot anybody down. I want to say, if you're thinking about the character and you're investing in that character in this way, I don't want to shut you down. I want to try it. I want to make sure I get what I need so that in the edit room I've got what I need, worst case scenario. But at the same time, if they're living with this character and they have a thought, they have some intuition, I want to run with it and see what happens.
How do you decide which scenes to film first? And are there certain types of scenes that should never be on the first call sheet on day one?
To me, I feel like you always want to kind of ease into your film. I feel like you want to have a day one where you can kind of start to figure out the people and the how things are going to work, and kind of not a heavy day the first day. Some of it's dictated by the logistics of your cast and who's working and what days and how many days you can hold people for. But inevitably, I would always try to say, make it an easy day on day one. And you want to get this well-oiled machine working so that when you get those days that really challenge everybody, including the cast and the crew, you've been working together. You have a shorthand already. So that's what I would say about where to start.
I hear actors in interviews say the finished movie wasn't the movie they signed up for. Not in your movies, but I've heard actors say this. And I often think that's a response to the editing or the way the movie was pieced together. Talk about that. You've heard that?
A lot of times a film is rewritten in the edit room because once you get in the edit room, you kind of have what you have to work with and you need to make the best of it. Once you get in the edit room, you kind of rewrite the film anyway. So sometimes it will come out as a slightly different film because you're just trying to make the best film you can make.
So would you say a movie takes its shape more during filming or during editing?
I think they're equally important. Your raw materials that you go into the edit room with are obviously determined by your production. But then what you do with them is up to you once you get in the edit room. So they're both very important. I mean, you can easily take great material and edit a bad movie. And I think occasionally you can probably shoot a bad movie, but edit it into a good movie. So, they're very different parts of the equation.
In terms of popularity and marketability, if there are A-level actors and B-level actors, are there A-level directors and B-level directors? And if there are, how does one director reach the next level?
I'm sure there are every letter of the alphabet directors, in terms of the different levels that they're working on. I think that your mobility is based on the work that you do, based on past work that you have done. And, if you do something that someone likes and they're working on a level that's, a bigger level than you previously worked on, and then you get hired for a job that's a bigger job. I mean, I think it's sort of maybe a meritocracy of some sort, but I know that there's so many factors, I guess, involved in how someone gets that next job and why and with whom, that it can't just be a pure meritocracy. I think there's obviously lots of other things that go along with it.
Are there certain narrative ideas that you would like to work with that you haven't done yet?
Well, I mean, as far as genre, yes, for sure. I mean, I want to make a Western. I've got 4 or 5 other projects that I'm pushing forward on a daily basis, and to me, it's just a constant evolution of what project do I want to take on that I know I may spend years and years of my life with, and countless hours and energy, and to try to make it happen. And at any given time, there's probably 8 or 9, 10 of them in various stages on. So yeah, there's lots of things I haven't done that I'd like to do.
What response do you get when people in the movie industry hear that you live in Virginia?
Sometimes it's this kind of surprise and wow, that's amazing that you can do that. You can live in a cool beach town and not be really not have your kids growing up in LA and things like that. And other times I hear it's, if you were here more often, you probably more jobs would fall into your lap. So it's a mix,
Why do you stay in Virginia?
I like living here. I mean, I think that it's a choice my wife and I made as far as our kids. And it's also about us, though. I mean, I like being here. And, I spend enough time elsewhere that it's nice to come home here. I know that's like a pretty generic answer, but that's really what it boils down to. I love leaving here, but I love coming back at the same time.
Well, it's home.
Yeah, it is.
Describe what it's like to be in Los Angeles and pitching a film across the table. Who's there? What's it like? Do you get water? What's it like?
It's always different. I think that, you can usually gauge the level of interest by the level of development people that are in the room. If it's a junior exec in the room across from you, then you know that they're trying to fill their calendar with meetings. But, if all of a sudden you've got a VP or a president of the company and head of development and a few other people sitting in the room with you, you know that they're serious, and they know that you were going to be there that day to talk to them, and they're all in the room. So I think that's the start, in terms of what kind of meeting this is. If it's a meeting that's a casual general meeting, it's about developing relationships, and I have, great friendships with people I made years ago, just from taking general meetings, and you start to see these people over and over again, whether it's at Sundance or on set some other place. You happen to show up and they're there, and you develop friendships and relationships along the way like that. So each meeting's different, but as far as the water thing goes, I don't know. It depends on whether I'm thirsty or not.
Thanks for coming on the show. It means an awful lot to me.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Thanks, Derrick.
I appreciate it.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you've been listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. To hear archived episodes, go to soundcloud.com/QAAPC or subscribe to the show on iTunes. For exclusive content, including upcoming shows, behind-the-scenes pictures, and more, follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at QAAPC. The executive producer of the Q&A with A.P.C. is Ben Riley. The music was arranged by Soup.